Iron Man 2 and Captain America: The Winter Soldier are very similar movies, but one of them is remembered as a high watermark for the franchise, while the other is remembered as that one with Mickey Rourke and he had a bird. Remember? He had a bird?
I want my bird.
We got you the bird.
I want my bird.
Hey, that's the bird. This is the bird.
This is not my bird.
So, what is it that separates these two movies? Well, I think there's one scene in each film that shows why one was a finely crafted political thriller that moved the superhero genre in a new direction, and the other was
just like that.
First, let's look at the movie's many similarities. They're both the first sequel to a successful origin film. In an early scene, the hero jumps out of an airplane and overcomes his initial challenges quite easily. And early in the movie, they're called in to answer to a government employee, and the government wants to exert greater control over the hero's life.
If S.H.I.E.L.D. is conducting a manhunt for Captain America, we deserve to know why.
We're safe. America is secure. You want my property? You can't have it.
In each movie, Gary Shandling plays Senator Stern, and he is the face of the power-hungry American government. This character also gets his comeuppance by the end of the film. The heroes have an African-American best friend who later gets superpowers and fights alongside the hero. Black Widow is a supporting character in the film and has a flirty relationship with the hero.
You so uncomfortable?
It's not exactly the word I would use.
In each movie, we're made to question her loyalty to the good guys. Each hero faces pressure from the government to change their ways and trust in the system. The hero's best friend is a tool of the government, and at one point he fights the hero. But they seem to work it out in the end. They're each haunted by their past and try to find a meaningful connection to a loved one that they've lost. And each of these loved ones help found S.H.I.E.L.D. When the hero arrives at an unsolvable problem, Nick Fury shows up to give new information and offer advice. The hero also learns critical information by studying old documents that are related to Howard Stark. A character on a video screen also gives them information that helps them solve the movie's mystery. Each movie also has two principal villains, one of whom has a connection to the hero's past. During the movie, the hero changes his appearance to reflect the personal obstacles that he's overcome. The finale involves a lot of computer hacking and a big firefight in a public venue. Nick Fury has an epilogue scene with the hero that helps to set up the next movie. And finally, each movie does a large amount of world building to help establish the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, those are the similarities. Now let's talk about the differences. I think The Winter Soldier succeeds over Iron Man 2 because of one word: efficiency. Each movie juggles multiple storylines, but Winter Soldier has the stronger narrative focus. So let's do a little mind mapping to look at the different storylines and themes in this movie. Number 1, Captain America is freshly thawed, and he feels like an outsider in this time and place. He is losing his connections to the past. His one true love, Peggy Carter, has dementia and constantly loses her memory.
You're alive.
Again, losing a connection to the past. Cap works for S.H.I.E.L.D., but he distrusts it.
This isn't freedom. This is fear.
They also introduce Sam Wilson and they become friends.
I do what he does, just slower.
Then there's Black Widow's storyline where Cap earns her trust and she becomes disillusioned by S.H.I.E.L.D. Project Insight is about to launch. Fury is dealing with a conspiracy inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. Then there's Alexander Pierce answering to the World Security Council. Bucky is alive and he's a villain called the Winter Soldier. And of course there's the mandated MCU Easter eggs. Now, each thread connects to one another in a variety of ways. Bucky works for Alexander Pierce, Peggy Carter helped found S.H.I.E.L.D., etc., etc., etc. But there is one event at the center of this movie that ties all of these plot threads together and drives the story forward. And that is the reveal that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been taken over by Hydra. Every other storyline flows through this one idea. This is the scene that transformed the MCU. Dismantling S.H.I.E.L.D. removed the Avengers' safety net, and it made the world reliant on heroes. Without S.H.I.E.L.D. to guide them, the Avengers created Ultron. Civil War broke out, and Thanos was able to snap. And all of that was possible because of this Hydra reveal. It's the scene that raised the dramatic stakes of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. So let's look closer at this scene. It comes at the exact midpoint of the movie, when characters typically reach their lowest point. Now at this point, we don't really know who the Winter Soldier is working for or why S.H.I.E.L.D. is after Cap. All we know is that there's a conspiracy and we want to solve the mystery. The scene is set in a bunker beneath Camp Lehigh, where Steve Rogers was trained and where S.H.I.E.L.D. was first headquartered. Now this fits many of the story's themes. Lehigh is tied to Camp's past, which he is losing a connection to, and Peggy Carter worked here to create S.H.I.E.L.D. However, beneath the headquarters, burrowing like a parasite, was Hydra, the organization that Pierce runs that corrupted Bucky and tried to kill Fury. Project Insight was actually created in this room, so the whole movie centers around this scene in this room, this very location. And this scene is really just a cleverly told info dump. It starts with a joke and a nerdy reference to war games.
Shall we play a game? It's from a movie that was
I know.
really popular.
I saw it.
That lightens the mood. But this is also clever foreshadowing, because War Games is about an AI that goes rogue and nearly destroys the world by launching missiles across the planet. Sound familiar? But then there's the reveal that Zola is now an AI, which forms a personal connection with Cap's past and the events of the first movie. He presents the story of First Avenger from a different point of view.
Hydra was founded on the belief that humanity could not be trusted with its own freedom. What we did not realize was that if you try to take that freedom, they resist.
But then the info dump cleverly pivots to include footage and events from the real world, as Zola talks about humanity surrendering their freedom in exchange for security.
Hydra created a world so chaotic that humanity is finally ready to sacrifice its freedom to gain its security.
We live in the age of the surveillance state. Between the Patriot Act, corporate algorithms, and cookie software, we've slowly surrendered our right to privacy so we can feel safe against the evildoers or unlock our iPhones just a little bit faster. Winter Soldier makes the Hydra reveal feel personal for the viewer, so we'll feel a fraction of Captain America's anger. In one sentence, Zola undermines everything Steve has sacrificed.
We won, Captain. Your death amounts to the same as your life, a zero sum.
It turns out that Cap's greatest success ended up being his greatest failure. And then the bombs come. End of scene. A new MCU is born. Now let's try to look at the scene's counterpoint in Iron Man 2. But first, let's talk about the story threads that this movie is balancing. There's Tony's palladium poisoning, which is also a metaphor for his alcoholism because it makes him behave erratically. There's also his complicated relationship with his father, which we hear about through dialogue.
He never told me he loved me. He never even told me he liked me.
The government wants to control the Iron Man technology before another country can duplicate it. Justin Hammer also wants Iron Man's technology and Tony Stark's government contracts. Mickey Rourke's Whiplash duplicates the armor and has a grudge against the Stark family.
You come from a family of thieves and butchers.
Black Widow is introduced and becomes Pepper's assistant. Both she and the main villain are Russian, and for some reason that never figures into the story. Nick Fury brings S.H.I.E.L.D. into the story by giving Tony a temporary palladium cure and information about his dad. And then there's Tony's personal relationships. His friendship with Rhodey becomes strained as he steals one of Tony's suits to give to the government. Tony hands Stark Industries over to Pepper and their romance develops, but it's endangered by his reckless behavior. Tony also reopens his father's creation, the Stark Expo. And finally, there's all of the studio-mandated MCU crossover material.
And proud we are of all of them.
Now, guess which story thread ties all of these storylines together, like the Hydra reveal connected the Winter Soldier? Well, maybe it's Tony trying to keep his armor out of the wrong hands, to prevent the Iron Man equivalent of a nuclear arms race. If that's the case, then the movie is about Tony learning to trust others and learn that we're all in this together. So, if the movie is about Tony trusting others, then the crucial scene, Tony's lowest point, would be his birthday party. That's when he proves that he's not responsible enough to wear the armor. He breaks his relationship with Rhodey, and his legacy is ruined. Except, that's actually not the key storyline in the movie. Because we also have this sins of the father and the past coming back to haunt you story involving Vanko and Howard Stark and S.H.I.E.L.D. The movie tries to squish all of these concepts together, and it kind of Cronenbergs the whole story. So the one story thread that connects all of these together is actually Tony's relationship with Howard Stark. It's the only common connection between all of these other storylines. Howard solved the palladium problem, he fired Vanko's dad, he designed weapons for the government, founded S.H.I.E.L.D., he founded Stark Industries, created the Stark Expo, and he even inspired Justin Hammer.
Howard Stark, really a father to us all.
And Howard Stark shouldn't be the key factor of the film, because this is the least interesting story in the movie. His strained relationship with Tony is mostly explained through dialogue.
We're talking about a guy whose happiest day was when he shipped me off to boarding school.
And also one old film where he's annoyed by his kid because he's in the middle of working.
Tony, what are you doing back there? What is that? Put that back. Put it back where you got it from.
Oh, what a monster. Favreau even said in the audio commentary that Howard is the key to the movie.
And so we found a way to incorporate, to create a character arc for this guy. And so the relationship with the dad seemed to be the fulcrum of that for us.
But the clunkiest part of this story is the reveal that Howard founded S.H.I.E.L.D.
Clearly, you know my dad better than I did.
As a matter of fact, I did. He was one of the founding members of S.H.I.E.L.D.
What?
I mean, that's pretty huge information. That could have been a whole movie by itself, just Tony uncovering his dad's life as a spy. Instead, it's a throwaway comment that's only here to form a connection between Howard and Nick Fury, so Fury has a reason to be in the movie.
But he's also enticing him to become part of S.H.I.E.L.D. and to join the group.
In my opinion, Fury shouldn't have even been in this movie until the last scene that teases the Avengers. Because when S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up, the movie grinds to a halt.
That thing in your chest is based on
The arc reactor was a stepping stone.
something so big that it was going to make the nuclear reactor. Is the other side of that. Your father found out he couldn't deliver.
They shipped his ass off.
Quite the environment you want to raise a kid in. You were the only person with the means and knowledge.
Fury starts to solve Tony's problems for him. I mean, there's so much expository dialogue here. It's like Fury's reading story notes straight from Marvel's creative committee. And what is the Marvel Creative Committee? Well, they don't exist anymore, but they were like the Illuminati of Marvel Studios. Comics writer Brian Michael Bendis, Marvel Comics editor-in-chief Joe Quesada, publisher Dan Buckley, Marvel Studios co-president Louis D'Esposito, and president of Marvel Entertainment Alan Fine. This committee was kind of a sounding board for what to put in the Marvel films, but they also often frustrated filmmakers, and it's rumored that their constraints led to Edgar Wright's departure from Ant-Man. I think they were key in shaping the early crossovers of the MCU, and they mandated many of the storylines in Iron Man 2, such as the inclusion of Howard Stark. So, if the whole plot revolves around Howard Stark, then what's the key scene of the movie that the whole plot revolves around? Well, it also happens to be the worst scene in the movie. Howard talks to Tony from beyond the grave.
I built this for you.
So, let's break down this scene. Fury takes an info dump on Tony and tells him,
You can solve the riddle of your heart.
do you get it? Because the arc reactor's in his heart, and he has daddy issues, and it's like he's in therapy, and he's dealing with stuff. Tony watches the outtakes from his dad's Stark Expo video while flipping through his journals. Papa Stark comes off a lot like a booze-swilling Roger Sterling.
That's where you've been.
But then it turns out that he recorded a very important message for his son just in the middle of all this other footage. He tells him that I built this expo for you, and it's my life's work. And someday, Tony,
You will change the world.
But he says this like he's talking about the Stark Expo, and doesn't give any indication that his words have a double meaning. He also doesn't leave his son a journal or schematics as part of his estate. He recorded a message on the same reel of film as the Stark Expo footage, and just kind of hoped that someday his son would happen across it someday.
That was the plan. Not a great plan.
And by the way, if you're going to say that like Hydra seized all of his documents and hid everything else, it was like a code or something, remember, when they made this movie, they didn't have plans for Hydra to take over S.H.I.E.L.D. Kevin Feige first pitched that idea to Chris Evans on the set of The Avengers. I mean, Tony was in his 20s when Howard died, so why would Howard record a message for his kid when he was 6? Wouldn't he have planned on sharing this information with Tony when he was older instead of hoping that his kid would find it when he grew up? Look, none of this makes any sense. Hiding the map to the molecule inside the expo is also really dumb. Favreau basically acknowledges this in the audio commentary.
So it's kind of fudgy. We fudge things a bit, but it looks visually good, and Robert sells it.
It's a shortcut scene, a way for the filmmakers to cut a lot of corners and convey information quickly. And then this last reveal that his dad actually loved him all along inspires Tony to make amends and solve his problems. All right, fine. But Howard still feels crammed into this movie, especially the reveal that he founded S.H.I.E.L.D. You could remove that information from the film and it wouldn't change anything in the story. Tony could have just been going through his father's journals and found this film. So then you gotta ask, why was S.H.I.E.L.D. crammed into this movie if it was totally unnecessary? Because the production of Iron Man 2 was a hot, steaming mess. According to an article on Cinema Blend, our source says that Iron Man 2 wasn't the movie Jon Favreau wanted to make. Marvel interfered heavily with his work on the movie and turned the project into an infomercial for the Avengers. Favreau felt the movie was rushed into production, and in the making of, Favreau talks about how they started filming before the script was even finished.
Yeah, it's Friday, and we're shooting not this Monday, but the following Monday. We're in writing sessions trying to pull the script together. It always feels like you're burning the candle at both ends.
Jon Favreau was used to working fast. He'd been writing and directing terrific independent films for a decade. He relied on a run-and-gun style and improvised dialogue. Iron Man didn't even have a completed script when they started shooting, and Robert Downey Jr. improvised, revealing Tony Stark's secret identity. But this off-the-cuff style and compressed deadline didn't mesh well with the emerging MCU structure of interconnected story elements. Now, we don't know exactly which story elements Marvel forced Favreau to include, but we can make some educated guesses. This movie was in pre-production at the same time as Captain America: First Avenger and Thor, hence the references to New Mexico. This is also why we get some cool Easter eggs, like the Tesseract in Howard Stark's journal. But there are other connections that feel extremely forced. First Avenger has a scene at the World's Fair in Flushing where young Howard Stark makes a presentation. So it's possible that the entire Stark Expo is mandated by Marvel to tie into First Avenger. Or maybe not. Favreau did grow up across the street from the World's Fair. Also, Howard's minor role in First Avenger as an SSR scientist might have led Marvel to mandate that he have a strong connection to S.H.I.E.L.D., hence this reveal in Iron Man 2. I also think that the creation of a new element, which the whole movie revolves around, was mandated by Marvel's creative committee. The movie never names the new element, but in the novelization it was called Vibranium, which of course appears in First Avenger. Novelizations are based on a screenplay's earlier drafts, so it's likely that when they started rolling cameras, Tony was going to synthesize more Vibranium since Howard only had a small amount of it.
That's the rarest metal on Earth. What you're holding there, that's all we've got.
And then there's all of this awkward setup for the Avengers.
I told you I don't want to join your super secret boy band.
So that's why I'm guessing that Fury, the new element, the Stark Expo, and Howard Stark were all mandated inclusions by the studio. And I think Favreau wanted to tell a story about a new nuclear arms race while focusing on Tony's alcoholism, as first told in the classic storyline Demon in a Bottle. I mean, that's just a guess though. I'm not saying all of this to take a dump on the MCU or Iron Man 2. This movie has many redeeming qualities. That fun indie feel is still there, with the pattern between Tony, Happy, Pepper, and especially Justin Hammer.
I'm actually hoping to present something at your expo.
Well, if you invent something that works, I'll make sure I get you a slot.
Justin Hammer is the best. I hope he returns in Dark Avengers.
I had an army of robots. What's he got?
I love Iron Man 2 because it's so flawed. It shows the growing pains of Marvel Studios. They were still figuring out how to create a cinematic universe. Compared to other clunky attempts from other studios, it's not all that bad. Remember how Warner Brothers crammed every Justice League character onto a laptop in the Superman sequel? Compared to other studios, Marvel had a very light touch. It's very cool how they created a timeline that shows when this movie takes place in relation to the other Phase 1 movies, and that you can see events from the Incredible Hulk taking place in the background. They were figuring out how to weave separate filmmakers' visions into one large tapestry. It's a phenomenal achievement of coordination, but this movie's shortcomings taught them to focus on story first and set up second, a lesson that all the other failed cinematic universes ignored. Winter Soldier is a phenomenal film, but it couldn't have existed without Iron Man 2. Guys, that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and remember to leave me your MCU ranking. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.